Past Sins, Chapter 13. All Hail the Queen. Clang, 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 clang. The tolling of the alarm bells at Canterlot Castle signaled the changing of the guard. Moving like a wave retreating from the shore, the soldiers guarding the castle battlements retreated from their posts as new, fresh guards moved in. The new guards, however, were not as numerous as the old. There were only about half as many, but in one of the castle courtyards additional soldiers stood in rank and file as they were inspected by one of the guard captains. The guard captain was silent as he went about his task. He went over the line of recruits, glaring coldly at some who were standing in less than perfect attention. They were not the well-trained soldiers usually entrusted with guarding the castle, but these were desperate times. The inspection was ended when the guard captain took notice of a white figure flying towards the castle. "Soldiers, attention!" the guard captain bellowed, causing the recruits to snap into stiff militaristic postures. Above them, Princess Celestia flew to an open balcony where Princess Luna was waiting. The pair exchanged words, but the ponies in the courtyard were too far away to have any hope of hearing what was said. Princess Luna then took to her wings and flew off in the direction Princess Celestia had just come from. Only once Princess Celestia had gone inside the castle did the guard captain relax and look to the recruits. "At ease, soldiers, but keep your ears open." The recruits fell to a parade rest, and kept their eyes focused on the guard captain as he spoke. "There is no sugar-coating it, mares and stallions. Equestria is in crisis. The castle has been on high alert since Nightmare Moon's return 7 days ago, and though the Royal Guard is known for its diligence and endurance, even the best soldiers need their rest eventually. That's where you recruits come in," the guard captain said as he looked over the line of soldiers. "I know you haven't had much training, barely the basics, but that's going to have to be good enough tonight. You will each be paired off with a seasoned member of the Royal Guard. You will assist them in keeping this castle secure, and I expect you to give it your all. Princess Celestia and the bulk of the Royal Guard need to rest, and we're here to make sure this is the best night of sleep they've ever had. Do you understand this?" "Sir, yes, sir," the line of newly recruited soldiers responded. The guard captain gave a firm nod to his head. "Good. Keep your eyes on the skies and the horizon. No pony gets close to the castle, no pony disturbs Princess Celestia, and if you see Nightmare Moon, I expect you to do your duty." "Sir, yes, sir," the recruits replied once more. "Good! Now report to your posts," the guard captain finished sternly. He then took wing and flew away as the line of soldiers quickly dispersed. The several dozen new recruits each quickly joined up with a seasoned veteran of the castle guard, forming teams of 2 before beginning their patrol of the castle. The night wore on slowly as the moon rose up into the heavens. The night was still and quiet, as it usually was around Canterlot Castle, yet the peace was not greeted as warmly as it usually was. The smallest sounds became reason for panic, and young recruits were jumping at shadows. A small clatter of armor caused one of the veteran guards to pause, and look back at the recruit he had been paired with. She had stumbled at the sight of a painting of Princess Luna, who had fallen forward on her nose. She was now picking herself up off the ground, rubbing her now sore nose as he watched. "Keep it together." The recruits quickly stumbled up beside him and gave a brief salute. "Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. It won't happen again, sir." The veteran guard rolled his eyes, and resumed the patrol route as the recruit close to his side. She was still shaking her armor and glancing nervously at shadows. "You're going to have a nervous breakdown if you don't relax," the veteran told the recruit, and she jumped at fear of a statue of Princess Celestia. "I'm sorry, sir," the recruit apologized as she tried to keep herself calm. "It's just... what have you heard about Nightmare Moon?" "Nothing good," the veteran answered as he continued to lead them through the castle. He knew the patrol route by heart. He had walked it more times than he cared to admit. I heard that Nightmare Moon is more powerful than Princess Celestia. That she was able to. Kid, take a breath and stop thinking about it, the veteran guard lectured, keeping his tone flat and professional. You'll never make it through the shift if you psych yourself out. Sorry, the recruit apologized. I'm just worried. Well, you'd be a fool not to be. Well, you can't let that get to you. Just try and think about something else. The recruit nodded her head. Okay, so, where is Princess Luna and the rest of the regular army? In the Manhattan area, the veteran guard replied as he and the recruit rounded a corner. They're doing aerial and magical sweeps to try and find Nightmare Moon and the ponies helping her. Not to question the commanders, but why aren't they here? The recruit asked. She looked to a shadow that bore a vague resemblance to an alicorn and swallowed nervously. Shouldn't we be keeping the army together? Keeping the princesses together? That's what some of the generals think. But the princesses just don't want to sit and wait for Nightmare Moon to attack. They don't want to give her a chance to prepare herself, so they're searching the countryside with the army. The recruit jumped and span around on the spot to look behind her. The veteran guard looked as well, but didn't see anything. There's nothing there, he told her before continuing along the patrol route. Yeah, the recruit agreed, trying to keep herself calm and failing. So, what do we do if Nightmare Moon attacks the castle besides pray? You and me are stationed to protect the unicorns who are holed up in the library, the veteran guard answered. The recruit took a few quick steps, so she was in line with the veteran guard. Why are there unicorns in the library? Protection spells, the veteran said. He and the recruit rounded another corner, moving deeper into the castle. The generals aren't stupid. After how easily Nightmare Moon dispatched guards at the Summer Sun celebration, we know the Royal Guard doesn't stand much of a chance up against her alone. So we recruited a bunch of strong spellcasters to set up some defensive magic. The recruit's fear subsided a little with that knowledge. So, will the defensive magic let us beat Nightmare Moon? Nope. We're just here to hold our ground as long as we can if she and that cult of hers attacks, the veteran answered. We hold our ground so that the word of attack has time to reach Princess Luna and she has time to get back. Then she and Princess Celestia will attack Nightmare Moon together. A confident smile spread onto his face. No matter how strong Nightmare Moon is, she can't take on both princesses at the same time. Well then, I guess I need to be very careful no pony raises the alarm, the younger guard said, her voice shifting in tone. The strange answer, in combination with the change in the recruit's voice, was enough to make the veteran guard turn. He was about to ask the recruit what was wrong. The words, however, never left his mouth. Before he could react, before he could scream, the veteran guard found himself engulfed in a dark cloud. Then, when the cloud released him, he slumped over onto the floor, lost in a deep sleep. The cloud itself stemmed from the recruit, who was smiling devilishly as the cloud receded back into her body. She then used her magic to levitate the sleeping veteran guards. The traitorous recruit then tossed him into an empty room before turning into a cloud and zipping through the castle hallways. The cloud was joined by others. Each cloud had once been one of the recruits, and each had performed a similar action. They had taken out the veteran guards they were once paired with, and were now sprinting through the castle to clear out any guards that remained. Then, when the castle's armored defenders all lay asleep, the clouds began to converge on the library. Outside the library's main doorway, the clouds began to merge together into a single mass. It grew larger and taller with each cloud that joined it, becoming a swirling field of stars. It twisted and turned as it waited for a few trailing clouds to reach it, and once it was whole, it slipped beneath the seam of the library door. At first, the silence of the castle persisted, but then a few muffled shouts began to escape the library. There was a commotion, a panic, but it ended just as quickly as it began. The library and the castle fell silent once more, except for the creaking of hinges as the library door swung open. Through the doorway, Nightmare Moon strode into the hallway. In the wake of her departure, all the unicorns that had been in the library lay on the floor, sound asleep, while she wore a confident smile. Nexus was right. This really was too easy. Nightmare Moon mused with a small chuckle while her voice returned to its normal tone. The plan had worked. Much like the time she had become the Shadow Bolt's attempt Rainbow Dash, Nightmare Moon had divided herself into multiple clones and then took the shape of other ponies. In this case, she had taken the place of a few dozen guards in training, who had been kept from reaching boot camp by Spell Nexus and the Children of Nightmare. It had been interesting to be a small army of pony for several days. Nightmare Moon had never before divided herself into so many copies, but it had served its purpose. The castle was undefended. No word of alarm had been sent to Luna, and she had Celestia all to herself. It was a grand gambit of a plan, one Nexus hadn't entirely approved of, since it meant sparing the castle guard. Still, this is how Nightmare Moon wanted it done. There were only 2 lives she would take that night, only 2 ponies whose blood she would spill, and the first one to face her wrath would be Celestia. Then, after both the princesses had been dealt with, the rest of Equestria would be left to cower in fear as she took place as queen. The first room Nightmare Moon checked was Celestia's bedchambers, where the princess should have been resting. Celestia, however, was not there. Thus, Nightmare Moon was forced to begin searching the rest of the castle. She worked her way down from one of the towers, checking every room as she went. Though it was a search that tried her patience, it was a search she had time for. Luna would not return to the castle before dawn. Yet, despite that fact, Nightmare Moon was beginning to fear Celestia may have sensed something was wrong and fled. She quickened the pace of her search, wanting to ensure that her prey did not slip from her grasp. Nearing the ground floor of the castle, Nightmare Moon was about to round a corner in the hallway when a noise began to reach her ears. Hoof steps. Almost instantly she turned into a cloud of smoke, and disguised herself as a rookie Pegasus guard. She then waited a few moments for the hoof steps to get closer, before she jumped around the corner to confront the unknown pony. "Halt! Who goes there?" The pony in question flinched, fumbling with his unicorn magic. He stumbled and swayed in an effort to keep the covered tray he was carrying from hitting the floor. It was a frantic few seconds of juggling, but eventually the unicorn got a hold of the tray and breathed a sigh of relief before looking up at the disguised Nightmare Moon. "My apologies. I am Silver Platter. I work in the royal kitchens," the unicorn stallion replied hurriedly, thankful it was only a guard that had startled him. "Only guards are supposed to be out at this hour," Nightmare Moon snipped, disguising her voice so she sounded like one of the recruits. "What are you doing?" "Delivering a meal to Princess Celestia." Nightmare Moon let her fake anger cool. She relaxed her body and folded her wings. "Isn't it a bit late for the princess to be eating?" "Yes," Silver Platter agreed, "but her pet Phoenix delivered the order to the kitchen, and I'm not exactly in a place to question the princess's eating habits." "I suppose not," Nightmare Moon remarked with a chuckle as an idea formed in her head. "I, however, cannot allow any pony to wander the halls. I will escort you to the princess, though I do not know where she is presently." "Princess Celestia has requested the meal be brought to her throne room," Silver Platter replied as he walked up beside the guard. Nightmare Moon nodded. "Then we shall head to the throne room, and I will allow you to set the pace." "Thank you. I'm honestly surprised I didn't run into a guard sooner," Silver Platter admitted, trying to make some small talk as they made their way through the castle. "Though, don't you ponies usually walk in pairs?" "I'm just a reserve patrol brought in so that the normal guard can rest. There aren't enough of us to keep paired patrols," Nightmare Moon answered flatly. "I guess that makes sense. The royal guard has probably been getting less sleep than the princesses. If what I've heard is true, they've been pulling double and triple shifts. Princess Celestia tried to tell them that it wasn't necessary, but the generals wouldn't hear of it. So all the guards and precautions are being done against Princess Celestia's wishes? The disguised Nightmare Moon asked. Silver Platter nodded. Yes, sir. But then, what else are we supposed to do? The princesses are in danger, and if we don't try to protect them, no pony will. So you would face Nightmare Moon, despite being horribly outmatched, just to protect the princesses? Me? Oh, heavens no, Silver Platter replied, laughing nervously. I'm just a unicorn that loves bringing good food to good ponies. I wouldn't stand a chance against Nightmare Moon. She'd squash me like a bug or gobble me up. No, defending the princess is what you and the other guards are doing, and I can respect that. Thank you, Nightmare Moon said, though the words tasted rotten in her mouth. She shouldn't have been accepting thanks when she was the one the guards and princesses feared. Still, she kept her composure and let the conversation subject die into silence before bringing up another, since the servant pony seemed nervous. What are you bringing the princess? Nothing much. It's all just a lot of comfort food, though I can certainly understand why she wants it. Stressful times, after all. Silver Platter levitated the plate he was carrying lower and lifted up the lid so Nightmare Moon could see the food. We've got a bowl of maroon carrot soup, a few freshly picked apples from the princess's golden apple tree, and a very large slice of cloud cake with a frosting flour. Nightmare Moon arched an eyebrow. That soup is purple. Silver Platter chuckled and put the lid back on the tray of food. Of course, maroon carrots are purple, so it makes sense the soup made from them would be purple. They're actually sweeter in flavor than most common carrots. I prefer celery soup, Nightmare Moon commented before the pair rounded a corner and a large set of doors came into view. I'm a fan of tomato soup myself. Anyways, we're here now, and if you wouldn't mind, could you wait out here? It'll just take me a couple of minutes to give the princess her meal, then you can escort me back to the kitchen. I don't believe that will be necessary, Nightmare Moon answered Silver Platter. After all, you're about to go to sleep. Before Silver Platter could turn around, Nightmare Moon had transformed into a cloud and engulfed him. But in a few moments the deed was done. She had laid out the sleeping platter out on the floor before disguising herself in his image. She then drew the covered serving tray close and ensured the food inside had not been spilled before moving towards the throne room door. Celestia sat back in her throne, staring mindlessly at the ceiling. She was tired and would have rather been asleep, but sleep did not come easily. She dreaded Nightmare Moon's coming attack, feared for Luna's safety, and to top it all off, no pony had seen or heard from Twilight Sparkle in days. There was simply too much weighing on her mind to get any sleep. Knock! Knock! Celestia perked her ears up and moved her gaze from the ceiling to the throne room doors as a figure poked his head inside. My apologies if I disturbed you, Your Highness, but I have the meal you requested. Thank you, Silver Platter, Celestia greeted, and I do apologize for making a request like this so late in the evening. No apologies necessary, Your Highness, Silver Platter replied. He crossed the room and presented the serving tray to the princess. Though I hope you don't mind if I linger. That way I can take the dishes back to the kitchen once you've finished. Celestia smiled and took the tray in her own magic. I do not mind in the slightest. She then removed the lid from the tray and sniffed the warm soup. The aromas offered her some comfort, but not as much as the food itself was bringing. She wouldn't admit it to any pony, and any pony who knew wouldn't dare say it in public, but she had a tendency to eat when she was anxious, to seek comfort in sweet and savory foods. It was a habit that, thankfully, didn't cause Celestia too much trouble since she was rarely truly nervous. Still, after Nightmare Moon was dealt with, she would need to put herself on a diet to get her eating habits back in order. She had indulged in cloud cake a few too many times over the past week. The Pegasus-made dessert was her great weakness, at least when it came to food. The dessert, however, she would save for last. With the help of a spoon, Celestia began to enjoy the soup, which danced across her tongue and warmed her insides. Then came the apples, which offered a crisp freshness that was unmatched by any other fruit in the kingdom. Finally, she allowed herself to eat the cloud cake. Each bite of it melted in her mouth, coating her tongue in its light, rich flavor. The last thing to enter Celestia's mouth was the large frosting flour that had been on top of the slice of cloud cake. She chomped down on the carefully formed mass of frosting, and licked her lips to savor every last trace of its sweet flavor. A smile then slipped onto her face, and she leaned back on her throne. Silver Platter, seeing his princess had finished her meal, took the platter and set it off to one side before he began to walk to the back of the throne. "Was the meal to your liking?" Celestia nodded. "It was delicious. Be sure to extend my thanks to the kitchen staff. I may just be able to get some sleep tonight thanks to that meal." "Good," Silver Platter said from behind the throne as his voice began to shift. "Every pony deserves a good last meal." Celestia snapped her head to the side, watching as a figure stepped out from behind her throne. Where Silver Platter had been, that pony disappeared beneath her regal seat. The pony that stepped into her vision was decidedly not the unicorn waiter. Celestia bristled and furrowed her brow. "How did you get in here?" "You should be more careful when bringing in new recruits, Celestia," Nightmare Moon mused with a taunting smile on her lips, as she walked out from behind the throne and positioned herself in front of Celestia. "They aren't always as loyal as your normal guards. So, is that what happened? Did some of your cultists infiltrate the castle?" "No, I did this alone," Nightmare Moon commented before she broke into a cloud. The cloud divided itself into multiple pieces, each piece floating to a clear section of the throne room floor before manifesting into a doppelganger of a royal guard. Each clone looked uniquely different, but they were all looking at Celestia with Nightmare Moon's turquoise eyes. Celestia huffed, and she let her cold glare fall on the many clones. "It would seem you are just as powerful as you were 1,000 years ago, even though you lack the power Luna currently possesses." "You can thank Spell Nexus for that. Whatever power Luna retained after the elements of harmony purified her was replaced by power drawn from the Everfree Forest," Nightmare Moon explained while she reformed herself. "And what of my guards and servants?" Celestia pressed. I can only imagine you went through them to get to me." "Don't worry your pretty little head, Celestia. Your guards are now catching up on the sleep they deprived themselves of by protecting you. As to your servants, they are unaware of what occurs, except for Silver Platter. He sleeps in the hallway just outside this room." Celestia's stern exterior cracked and confusion filled her eyes. "You didn't hurt any pony?" "I had no need to," Nightmare Moon said with a short, confident chuckle. "Heh. You had no need to bring down lightning at the summer sun celebration, and yet you had no qualms doing so then," Celestia said. She rose from her throne and started to walk towards Nightmare Moon. "Now you are showing mercy and restraint. Perhaps, despite your appearance, you are not quite the same mare I once knew." A chilling laugh escaped Nightmare Moon's lips. "Ha ha ha! You're just as delusional as Twilight Sparkle." "And where is my student, Nightmare Moon?" Celestia asked. "I can only imagine you're the reason no pony has seen her in days." "She's in my dungeon," Nightmare Moon answered. She kept a safe distance from Celestia, moving towards the far side of the throne room as Celestia reached the bottom of her very large and extravagant throne. The pair of alicorns began to circle each other, Celestia wearing a stern frown while Nightmare Moon wore a smug smile. "And how did she end up there?" Celestia asked cautiously, on guard for any sudden movements. "She came to me, if you would believe it," Nightmare Moon answered. "I would have thought you'd taught her better than to go running to the very ponies that would want to capture her. But that's what she did. She wanted to tell me some sob story about how she was sorry for what happened. It was truly pathetic." Celestia ruffled her wings as she focused more intently on Nightmare Moon. "Yet you let her live, even though, as long as she is alive, the elements of harmony are a threat to you." "I will tell you what I told Spell Nexus. I will deal with Twilight Sparkle in my own way and in my own time," Nightmare Moon snipped, horn beginning to glow. "Besides, you have more important things to be worried about, Celestia." Nightmare Moon's magic surged, and in the air beside her a magical blade took shape. It was forged of what looked like black metal that shined and flashed in calm water beneath the night sky. While alicorns were very powerful, they were not truly immortal. Their strength came from the amount of magic they held, and the best tool to counter that magic was a weapon of pure, compressed mystic energy, much like the sword Nightmare Moon now wielded. "But why would you give Twilight's friends a chance to rescue her? Why would you risk them returning and using the elements of harmony?" Celestia asked. She formed her own magical sword, a pristine white blade, which she held in a defensive position while she and Nightmare Moon continued to circle one another. "They pose no danger while I have Twilight," Nightmare Moon noted confidently, "and they have no hope of rescuing her. Should they try, my guards would capture them. They would be brought before me unharmed, so that I would be able to decide their fate." Celestia arched an eyebrow. "Unharmed? Why would you care about their well-being? Why not let your minions bring them in bruised and beaten?" Nightmare Moon snorted in contempt. "I will not let Spell Nexus or any pony take the vengeance I deserve for what those ponies did to me at the last Summer Sun celebration. While you would not know it, being torn off from another pony like a cheap costume by the elements of harmony is an excruciating experience, and they will endure double the pain they caused me that day." "Then what do you intend to do with them?" Celestia questioned. "Whatever I see fit," snarled Nightmare Moon. "Their fate is in my hooves, and no pony, neither you nor Nexus, has any right to question my decisions. I am above reproach." "You speak as if you and Nexus are not seeing eye to eye." Nightmare Moon laughed, though made sure to keep her sword raised. "He is a fool who believes he knows my every desire. But I am not so easily understood by such common ponies. He knows of my desire to seize Equestria, and acts to support that, as he should. It was his hooves, however, that hurt Twilight, and it was his belief that I would have her hanged or beheaded, as if that was such a thing was my desire." "And isn't it?" Celestia asked, pressing the issue. "Would it not be simpler for you to let him do as he wishes with Twilight? Why not let him do as he wishes to her, and save yourself the trouble?" Nightmare Moon launched herself at Celestia while swinging her sword in a wide arc. "No pony hurts Twilight except me." Celestia barely managed to block the blow, the clang of metal striking metal echoing across the throne room walls. Nightmare Moon then attempted a thrust, but Celestia spread her wings. With a single powerful flap, Celestia threw herself back, dodging the blade and putting more distance between herself and Nightmare Moon. "I do not wish to fight you," Celestia said, but Nightmare Moon paid her words no mind. Celestia was just barely able to raise her sword to block a downward swing from Nightmare Moon, and the two magical swords clashed with a resounding clang. Nightmare Moon pressed her blade against Celestia's in an attempt to break her defense with sheer force. "Then surrender yourself!" Celestia buckled momentarily under the weight of Nightmare Moon's attack, but she would not be so easily defeated. A careful turn of her blade sent Nightmare Moon's sword down into the throne room floor. Celestia then proceeded to bring up the butt of her sword, the pommel, around to strike Nightmare Moon in the throat. The sudden thrust of the sword's blunt hilt into her neck caused Nightmare Moon to stumble back, coughing and wheezing from the blow. Celestia, however, did not press her offensive. She instead stayed on the far side of the throne room, lowering her sword as her voice echoed across the marble hall. "You have told me what you and your minions did to Twilight Sparkle. But what have you done to her, Nightmare Moon?" Nothing," Nightmare Moon choked out. "She has been recovering from the injuries given to her by Nexus under the care of my castle's doctor." An expression of surprise became etched across Celestia's face. "You are caring for her?" "I told you, no pony else will have my vengeance. I am having her injuries treated simply so that she can properly appreciate the pain I will induce when I take my due justice for what she's done to me." Nightmare Moon's shout hung in the air, words that echoed not with rage but with pain. Celestia remained silent until the echoes had faded, and then spoke with an odd, almost concerned tone to her. "And what has she done to you, Nightmare Moon?" The question struck Nightmare Moon's heart and set her fury ablaze. "Don't you dare speak as if you don't know!" she yelled, her words dripping with loathing as she recovered from Celestia's blow. "It was her and her friends that set the elements of harmony upon me. That, and I have not forgotten her most recent crimes. Twilight Sparkle betrayed, lied to, and above all else, abandoned me." "Listen to me, Nightmare." Celestia paused, taking a step forward as her tone became more pleading. "No, listen to me, Nyx. I'm sorry. I did not want to take you away from Twilight forcibly, and I had every intention of returning you to her the next morning." Nightmare Moon gritted her teeth. "Those are nothing but lies. You and Twilight conspired against me that night. Twilight knew what you were going to do, and she did nothing to stop it. She wanted you to take me away." "Nyx, that is not true. Twilight tried to convince me you weren't a danger. She didn't want to let you go." Nightmare Moon drew in a deep breath, her cold composure returning. "But she did let me go, and I will never forgive her for it. And I don't think I'll ever forgive you either," seethed Nightmare Moon. She pointed the tip of her sword at Celestia. "It's all your fault. Everything is your fault. You allowed the ponies of the past to ignore the night sky, turning Luna into me. You sent your student to Ponyville, where she and her friends murdered me with the elements of harmony. You took me away from Ponyville, from my simple, ignorant life." Nightmare Moon sucked in a breath, held it, and fixed an accusing gaze on Celestia. "All that I have lost, all that I have become, all I can ever claim to be, is a shadow of your actions. Tonight you shall now pay for your sins, Celestia." With those words, Nightmare Moon lashed out, springing into the air and soaring across the room while yelling in a furious rage. She brought the sword beneath her and swiped at Celestia as she flew by. Celestia dodged to the left and spun herself, just in time to see Nightmare Moon land and resume her ground attack. Sparks soared into the air as their blades clashed again and again. The pair were evenly matched for a time, but then Celestia saw an opening. Nightmare Moon, swung too wide, overextended her attack, and Celestia seized the opportunity. As quickly as her hooves would allow, Celestia spun around and bucked. Her hooves hit Nightmare Moon in the side, and the force of the blow sent her flying across the room. She would have lightly crashed into a wall, but with a flutter of her wings, Nightmare Moon was able to right herself. She then put her hooves on the ground and skidded to a stop before she glared at Celestia with murderous intent. "Nyx, please, I implore you to listen to reason. End this senseless fight. I promise." Nightmare Moon ignored Celestia and charged back into battle. Her and Celestia's blades clashed once more, with Nightmare Moon putting all her strength behind the attack. It was enough to force Celestia's blade out of the way. Knowing her defenses had been broken through, Celestia put her strength into her legs and tried to jump away, but she could not escape without harm. Nightmare Moon struck out again, and the tip of her sword nicked Celestia's neck, leaving a small cut that began to weep blood. Celestia landed a few feet back, then cast a surge of magic from her body. The wave of energy pushed Nightmare Moon back, giving Celestia a moment to recover. She could feel herself bleeding, but remained focused on her opponent. "Nyx, please." Nightmare Moon winced, her voice dripping with her hatred of Celestia. "Stop calling me Nyx. I am not Nyx. I can never be Nyx because of you. Because of you, I am, and will forever be, Nightmare Moon. Now silence your tongue and quit holding back. Fight me, coward!" "I am not a coward," Celestia retorted firmly as she wiped the blood away with her right forehoof. "And I am not the only one holding back. You strike only to injure me, Nyx, and that is not the only time you have shown mercy. You put my guards to sleep, where in the past you wouldn't have batted an eye at seeing them injured or even dead. You speak of Twilight's betrayal, and yet you have not taken your vengeance against her. If you are truly Nightmare Moon, then why do you show mercy?" I... Nightmare Moon struggled with her words, her mind locking up as she was faced with Celestia's questions. Why was she holding back? Why wasn't she giving it her all? She had practiced with a sword as the guards in training. She knew how to fight, so why wasn't she going for the killing blows? "Nyx," Celestia began, lowering her sword as the fight slipped into a lull, "I know you've been hurt. I know you have a right to be angry at me, and I do not deserve your forgiveness for the part I played in turning you into this. Yet, if this is what you truly wanted, you would have killed me with that last blow. Please, end this farce and let us put our swords away. It is not too late." "Too late?" Nightmare Moon echoed, an inferno of rage flashing to life behind her eyes. "Too late? It was always too late for me!" Nightmare Moon yelled, her voice growing until she was shouting at the top of her lungs. At the same time her mane started to surge and swirl, reflecting the storm of anger that raged within. With a screech, Nightmare Moon launched herself at Celestia, this time accompanying her charge with a volley of lightning. Celestia managed to block a few of the arcane bolts with her sword, but was struck by others. The bolts did little damage themselves, but they caused Celestia to wince, which made it all the more difficult for her to block Nightmare Moon's coming sword strike. Yet the rage and magic behind Nightmare Moon's blade would prove too much. Their blades crashed with a thunderous crack, and before Celestia could retreat, her own sword began to fracture. It then burst apart, shattering like glass as its magic failed beneath the force of Nightmare Moon's sword. The magic released from her broken sword knocked Celestia off her hooves. She rolled and bounced across the throne room floor, and eventually came to a stop at the base of her own throne. Shards of the shattered blade had speckled her with small cuts, and her breathing was labored as the pain of the magical knockback pulsed in her body. Celestia took a few deep gasping breaths to try and recover more quickly, but it was already too late. When she looked up, she saw Nightmare Moon standing over her, and the black magical blade Nightmare Moon wielded was pressed against her neck. "It's over, Celestia," Nightmare Moon said coldly, and Celestia knew it was true. Yet, instead of closing her eyes and waiting for the bitter end, Celestia locked her gaze on Nightmare Moon. The pair stared at each other for a long time, both still as stone. All it would take for Nightmare Moon to end Celestia's life was a twitch of her sword, yet she just stood there. Nightmare Moon pressed her sword into Celestia's neck. "Shut up! I could end this right now. I could kill you, get my revenge for everything you've done against me, and truly have Equestria for my own. Just a quick slash of my sword and your life would be forfeit." "Yes, you have beaten me," Celestia said, "but I still implore you to stop, Nyx, and listen." Nightmare Moon put more pressure on her sword, the blade breaking the surface of Celestia's skin and drawing blood. "Why? Why should I stop now? Give me one good reason why I shouldn't slash your throat." "Because, though you deny it, your actions and words tell me that you still care about Twilight. So I ask you to stop, Nyx, and realize where you stand. This is your point of no return. If you finish me here, you will secure Equestria for your own. But across Equestria, even in Twilight's eyes, you shall never be seen as anything but my murderer and a monster." Nightmare Moon's eyes pulsated at the mention of Twilight Sparkle, and she lowered her sword a few inches. Celestia had dared to hope that Nightmare Moon had finally listened to reason, but a few moments later the sword was back against her neck. Yet the murderous intent that once filled Nightmare Moon's eyes had faded, and her sword was trembling, as if she was having trouble keeping it up. Then, with a slow breath, Nightmare Moon lowered her blade. She spoke with a broken, hollow voice, as her mane began to wrap around Princess Celestia. "Your time will come, but before then, you will know the pain I've suffered. For 1,000 years you shall be banished in the sun, held amongst its magic, just as I was held in the moon. Only then, once you've known the full extent of my suffering, shall you know death." With those final few words, and a flash of light from within her mane, Nightmare Moon made good on her word. She banished Celestia to the sun, leaving her alone in the throne room. Yet, even after Celestia was gone, Nightmare Moon remained where she was. She stared at the spot where Celestia had been before, and she looked up to the now empty throne. Then, with little warning, Nightmare Moon sucked in a deep breath, and cried out in rage, and sunk her sword so deep it and sunk her sword so that it sunk deep into the back of Celestia's throne. Luna banked to one side, looking over Canterlot. It was nearly dawn, and she was returning to the castle so that Celestia could fly out and meet the army and continue the search for Nightmare Moon. The search over the evening had been fruitless. Both exhaustion and disappointment had made Luna yearn for the comfort of her bed. Yet, as Luna drew closer to the castle, she began to take notice of how still and quiet it was. She saw no guards moving among the battlements, saw no pony at all. Some servants should have at least been out tending to the early morning chores, but there was no pony around. Luna felt the air catch in her chest, and with a few furious flaps of her wings, she surged forward towards the castle. She dove into the courtyard, and did not land or slow down. Instead, she threw open the castle doors with her magic and soared through the hallways. It was something Celestia was unable to do because of her size, but Luna was still small enough that her wingspan fit inside the corridors. The castle was deserted, utterly empty, and it did nothing to improve Luna's nerves. She flew with even greater speed, fearing the worst as she raced amongst the halls. Luna first went to Celestia's bedroom, but when her sister wasn't there, Luna went to the next likely place, the throne room. When she couldn't sleep, Celestia always liked to sit there. "Sister! Sister! Art thou in here?" Luna called, landing in the throne room doorway. She looked first to the throne, desperately hoping to see Celestia there. Her sister, however, was nowhere to be seen. In her place, standing in front of the throne, was an all-black alicorn with a swirling magical mane and tail. Luna felt herself tense when she saw Nightmare Moon, a figure she had only ever before seen reflected back in a mirror. Was that really what she used to look like? Now she saw why so many ponies told scary stories about her. An all-black mare with a magical mane, a tail of the night, and piercing dragon eyes. That was the things nightmares were made of. Swallowing nervously, Luna drew up her courage and began to move across the throne room. Though she was walking on the regal red rug that ran from the door to Celestia's throne, Luna's hoofsteps were still audible. "You're back earlier than I expected. Or perhaps it is later in the morning than I realize," Nightmare Moon remarked quietly. She turned to face Luna, revealing her tired eyes. "Where is Celestia?" Luna asked with a tremor in her voice. "Your precious sister is getting a taste of her own medicine. She has been banished to the sun," Nightmare Moon replied, forcing firmness in her voice. "Though, do not take this as a sign of mercy. I merely wish for Celestia to know the torture of the imprisonment that I endured for 1,000 years. Once she has known that, her life is forfeit." "Imprisonment we endured," Luna corrected. "Or hast thou forgotten where thou came from?" "I have not forgotten. All the memories I have either my own, or memories that came from you when you were the one called Nightmare Moon. It is from those memories that I know my desires and destiny. It is a destiny you were too weak to seize for your own, but a destiny that will be mine." "But is it a destiny that you want?" asked Luna. "I cannot recall any time when I did not want the eternal night and the defeat of Equestria's royalty, which includes you," Nightmare Moon answered. She manifested her magical sword and began to walk towards Luna. "Now defend yourself!" Luna formed two smaller, shorter blades which floated on either side of her. "Is that truly all thou can remember? Dost thou not recall the time thou spent with Twilight Sparkle, Nyx?" "Do not call me that. I am Nightmare Moon. But dost thou remember the time thou spent with Twilight?" Luna pressed. Nightmare Moon snorted in contempt. "Of course I do. I would not forget something so recent so easily. Then thou hast memories beyond being Nightmare Moon, beyond the memories thou had to inherit from me." "What is your point? Those memories are a few short months compared to the hundreds of years of memories I have from the time when we were one and the same." "But I know those memories are 1,000 times happier than the memories we share. I came to know thou briefly, Nyx. At the dinner after the spring festival, thou talked of friends, of school, of Twilight. Thou were happy. Why art thou throwing that away to pursue old desires that were never yours?" "They are my desires," Nightmare Moon spat. "I want vengeance. I want Equestria. I want ponies to look at the beauty of my night." "But it is not thy night. It is mine," Luna stressed. "I was the one that made the night. I am the one that raises and lowers the moon. I am the one who was jealous of Celestia. I was the one that that grew to loathe the ponies that stepped through my night. But that is because I was the one who was being ignored, not thou." Nightmare Moon stomped a hoof. "It will be my night soon enough. With you gone, I shall inherit not only your memories, but your status as ruler of the nighttime sky. I will make it more beautiful than you ever could. Ponies will look upon it, and be in such awe that they will love the night, love me, and forget all about the sun and you royal sisters. Nyx, Nyx, you do not have to be what I was," Luna pleaded, not for her own sake, but for the sake of the filly she had met not so long ago. "You can escape it. Or dost thou forget that I was able to change what I was? I am not Nightmare Moon any more, which means You do not have to be either." Nightmare Moon hung her head and lowered her sword. "No, you are wrong. It is not just because of the memories I inherited from you. The loathing, the fear, and the hatred Equestria had for you has become mine as well. The elements of harmony left you to live a happy life again, while I became the scapegoat, the monster in the dark you were saved from. I never asked nor wanted you to take responsibility for what I did. I should be the one to bear those burdens. But if thou dost not want to stop this, thou shalt be guilty of your own crimes. It will not be my past that haunts you, but thy own. So please, nix. Just. I told you not to call me that. I am Nightmare Moon. It is what I am. It is the only thing I can be. It is the only thing Equestria will ever see me as. No matter what you say, they will only ever see Nightmare Moon. Now, defend yourself. If I have to be Nightmare Moon, then I shall also be Equestria's queen." "I am sorry, Nyx, but I cannot let you do this," Luna said shakily, trying to keep a firm stance, though she fully realized how outmatched she was. She lifted her twin blades, taking up a defensive position. "I shall fight to protect Equestria." Nightmare Moon began to stride toward Luna like a storm cloud rolling over Equestria. "Yes, you will fight, you will fall, and then you will share Celestia's fate, because this is my kingdom now." Whispers and hushed voices filled the Ponyville square. Every pony in town had gathered outside the town hall. The sun was supposed to have risen several hours ago, but instead the moon still lingered in the center of the sky, filling the world with its pale glow. What was worse was the dark pattern of craters that had returned to the moon's surface. The craters darkened the moon's surface, returning it to the rough silhouette of the mare and the moon. Beneath that moon, the mayor of Ponyville, Ivory Scroll, moved up to the podium set on the veranda of the town hall. It looked like she had been crying, but the mare wiped her eyes and cleared her throat, forcing herself to be strong. "Fillies and gentle colts, as mayor of Ponyville, it is my duty, my solemn duty, to announce that Princess Luna and Princess Celestia have—" She choked on her words, but after licking her lips she managed to continue. "They have been defeated." A hushed gasp cascaded through the crowd. Ponies looked at each other with disbelief, but none dared to speak, as they hung on every word that left Ivory's mouth. "I received word just after when the sunrise was due to occur. During the night, Nightmare Moon seized Canterlot Castle without raising an alarm. She defeated Princess Celestia, and then laid in wait until Princess Luna returned to the castle a few hours ago. Both princesses are now imprisoned in the sun and moon, respectively." Ivory Skull coughed again, trying to keep the strength in her voice from failing. "Now Nightmare Moon has hereby decreed herself Queen of Equestria, and the children of Nightmare, the ponies responsible for her return, are already taking control of the government. I have been told that any open rebellion against the new crown will be harshly met, and that—" Ivory's voice began to tremble as she forced out the final words. "And that we have seen the last of the sun. That this night will last forever." Another gasp cut through the crowd, and a few ponies even fainted. Yet, before the truth could even properly sink into the residents of Ponyville, another voice rang out through the now everlasting night. "Oh, Miss Mayor, you speak of this as if it were some great tragedy." Every head in the crowd spun around, looking back to see Nightmare Moon striding towards them. She was flanked on either side by two of her own royal guard. They were clad in armor that matched hers in color, and their eyes, like hers, seemed to glow in the night with their turquoise irises. The crowd quickly parted and made a path, much like they did the day Nightmare Moon first returned. Some even bowed as she passed, a sight that made Nightmare Moon smile. She couldn't expect all of them to be eager to bow right away, but it was a start, and she would be patient. After all, she had all the time in the world. Once she had reached the veranda of Town Hall, Nightmare Moon used her magic to move the podium Ivory Scroll had been speaking from off to one side. She then looked to Ivory Scroll and saw that the mare had retreated several steps and was trembling like a leaf. Still, Ivory managed to bow to her new queen. Satisfied with the level of respect the mare had shown her, Nightmare Moon turned to face the crowd and her voice rang out through the night. Citizens of Ponyville, it is hard to believe that merely a week ago I stood among you, freshly reborn, and now I am already your queen. One must truly wonder how sturdy your monarchy was, considering how easily it was toppled. But toppled it I have, and I now stand as your one true queen. Under me, Equestria shall flourish under the eternal night. You need not fear for your crops or your homes, for while the night can be cold, those most loyal to me have already begun making the act of making this kingdom a place that can thrive beneath the moonlight. They have been long prepared for the night eternal, and there is further reason to rejoice, Nightmare Moon told them, for, as I promised on the day of my return, I have not forgotten the kindness you all offered me when I was but a scared little filly. For this, I have decided to give Ponyville a great honor, to bestow upon it a gift no other town or city in Equestria will share. The ground shook, a distant rumbling reaching the ear of every pony, as Nightmare Moon's eyes glowed. All heads turned to the distant rock quarries in the hills just beyond Ponyville, where the rumbling seemed to be emanating from. For a moment, none of them were able to see anything, yet, as the rumbling continued, a single spire began to rise up against the horizon. The rumbling then rose to a terrifying cacophony, as if the world was splitting in two. At the same time, the first spire began to rise higher and was joined by others. Soon a whole castle had risen up into view, casting a harsh shadow and looking down upon Ponyville like a giant ready to strike. When the castle had fully risen and the rumbling had stopped, Nightmare Moon looked down and savored the shock and horror on her subjects' faces. Yes, ponies of Ponyville, your eyes do not deceive you. For the time being, Canterlot shall remain the administrative capital of Equestria, but Ponyville shall be the true heart of this kingdom. It is here, in your town, that both I and my castle find a home, and Ponyville shall know prosperity unmatched as it slowly becomes the beating heart of Equestria. Nightmare Moon finished her speech with a triumphant smile and a flare of her wings. The crowd, however, did not share in her enthusiasm. The only pony that dared to speak was Ivory Scroll. She dared to take a few steps towards Nightmare Moon, only so she could bow to her new queen. You honor us, your highness. We will gladly serve as your home. Nightmare Moon smiled. Well chosen words, mare. If you keep that attitude up, I may just let you keep your position. Well, some of us ain't going down without a fight. Nightmare Moon and the crowd as a whole turned their heads and saw 6 ponies standing in a nearby empty street. Nightmare Moon recognized 5 of the ponies. Applejack, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Fluttershy were all together, wearing their Elements of Harmony necklaces. They were standing strong, except for Fluttershy, who was hiding behind Rarity. Still, all 5 of them were there and together. The 6th pony, however, was one Nightmare Moon did not recognize. She appeared to be a simple earth pony. Her coat was blue, and her mane was a mixture of white and silver. She was for some reason, wearing a purple pointed hat that was decorated with silver and gold stars. She also had on a cape that matched the hat, and the mare stood with her head held aloft. It was a posture that reminded Nightmare Moon of Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon. Nightmare Moon hated the blue-colored pony already. Well, well, well. I was wondering when you five would show up. Who's the new mare? Nightmare Moon asked. Her name is... Nightmare Moon began, only for the blue pony to interrupt her. I believe that I can speak for myself, thank you very much. The new pony snipped. She then turned and gave Nightmare Moon a confident grin, as if she was looking at some pony far beneath her. Remember this face well, Nightmare Moon, for it will be the face of your doom. The blue pony exclaimed as she pointed a hoof at the self-appointed queen. For on this day it will be I, the great and powerful Trixie, who will single-hoofedly vanquish you and bring peace and order back to Equestria. An eruption of magical fireworks and firecrackers erupted from behind the blue pony, as if in fanfare for her words. The display, however, only made Nightmare Moon arch her eyebrows skeptically and look to Applejack. You're kidding, right? I assure you, Nightmare Moon, this is no jest, the blue pony crowed. A light purple glow encased the mare's hat, causing it to rise up and shift back on the pony's head. The adjustment revealed that the pony was, in fact, a unicorn. I, the great and powerful Trixie, shall defeat you. Okay, this has to be a joke, Nightmare Moon scoffed. This was your idea, Pinkie Pie, wasn't it? You five got together and decided to get on my good side by playing a prank. Very smart of you, but I think you may want to tell your friend here to tone it down. I may actually start to believe she intends to defeat me. That is exactly what the great and powerful Trixie intends to do, she said. The smile faded from Nightmare Moon's face, and a threatening coldness filled her voice. Do you understand who you challenge? Do you even have a clue about the power that courses through every fiber of my being? Trixie lifted a hoof anxiously at Nightmare Moon's statement, as if she was going to take a step back, when instead she planted her hoof back down defiantly. I am fully aware of your power, but I wield a far greater one, and with it I shall send you back to the dark pit you crawled out from. For you see, I am not merely a unicorn, but I am the most magical unicorn in all of Equestria. Nightmare Moon couldn't help but gape. This fool was either completely clueless or had a death wish. Who was crazy enough to be so boastful? The only time Nightmare Moon had ever heard of a pony with such an ego was when... Nightmare Moon's eyes pulsated, and she was struck with a realization. She knew this mare. Not personally, but she'd heard of her. Twilight had told her a story about a blue unicorn that had come to town, boasting she had defeated an Ursa Major. But when an Ursa Minor came to town, the unicorn was unable to do anything, leaving Twilight to save the day. It was a tale that had become one of her favorite bedtime stories, and that memory caused Nightmare Moon to smirk. Oh yes, of course. She spoke with a deceptively gentle tone. I've heard of you before, great and powerful Trixie. You have? I mean, of course you have. Far and wide, ponies have heard the tales of the miraculous feats of the great and powerful Trixie, she exclaimed before releasing more firework magic into the air. A chuckle escaped Nightmare Moon's lips. Yes, I know who you are. You are the egomaniac with a tacky hat that almost destroyed Ponyville with your boasting. Nightmare Moon's words sucked the air right out of Trixie's lungs and caused her pupils to narrow into tiny dots. At least, Nightmare Moon continued, that's how Rarity put it. When Twilight told me the last time you were here, she was more polite, though she basically said the same thing. Trixie turned and glared at Rarity. She hissed in a whisper, You know her,
And you told her that? Hey, don't get mad at her. She's not the one boasting she's going to save the day all by herself, Rainbow Dash argued in Rarity's defense. And I shouldn't need to remind you that your element of magic isn't worth a rotten apple without the rest of us, Applejack added, pointing an accusing hoof at Trixie. Trixie met the harsh tone in Applejack's voice with a snarl. Hey, you're the ones who convinced me to come back here. You are the ones that came to me, and the only reason I agreed because defeating Nightmare Moon would salvage my career. I wouldn't even be here if it weren't for you, so you had better not mess this up. As amusing as it is to meet the overconfident show pony from one of Twilight's stories, Nightmare Moon interrupted, if only to keep the 6 ponies from squabbling amongst themselves. I am curious. What makes you think you actually stand a chance against me? Just how do you plan to defeat me, an alicorn, when you are nothing more than a mere unicorn? I, the great and powerful Trixie, intend to use the most powerful magic known to ponykind. For I am now the new bearer of the element of magic, Trixie exclaimed. She lifted her hat again and revealed that she was wearing a familiar tiara. She then quickly swapped the two things around, setting her hat back on her head and placing the tiara on top of the hat. It allowed her to proudly wear both at the same time. And for the first time since her new transformation, Nightmare Moon felt real fear. She had made a miscalculation. She had come so far, but now her destruction was shearing her down. Even with Twilight, the supposed keystone of the elements, locked away, her friends had found a replacement, and Trixie wasn't wasting any time. To Nightmare Moon's horror, the elements of harmony began to come to life. They glowed, and began lifting the 6 wielders into the air. Nightmare Moon instinctively worked herself into a defensive position, and made sure she was ready to leap clear of the coming attack. She had been torn apart by the magical rainbow once. She would not let it happen again. She'd jump out of the way, try to escape, but she would not go down a second time so easily. The spell continued to grow in power, and the 6 ponies were engulfed in light. The crowd below began to cheer, and they looked on with eager eyes. The elements of harmony then launched their fabled rainbow, and the moment Nightmare Moon saw it, she was filled with an overpowering desire to laugh. The rainbow spat out by the elements of harmony was the size of a candy bar, and its colors were sickly and mismatched. It drifted on the wind like a leaf, and when it finally reached Nightmare Moon, it did not burn or hurt. All it did was make a small patch of her body feel warmer before it faded. If Nightmare Moon was to be honest, it was a rather pleasant sensation, like a warm towel. Yet, as Nightmare Moon tried to contain the laughter caused by her pitiful display, she was struck by inspiration. Wanting to teach the show pony a lesson and have a little fun at the same time, she took a deep breath. She then groaned loudly, as if in agony, and let her body burst into indigo smoke. The crowd all gasped and watched as the smoke faded into the night air, unable to believe what they had seen. Behind the crowd, the 6 ponies who had just wielded the elements of harmony laid sprawled out on the ground. When the group was led by Twilight Sparkle, the magic of the elements left them feeling refreshed and rejuvenated. Now, however, they were covered with scuffs and scratches. It was like the ancient magic had worked against them, not with them. Trixie herself hastily shoved the tiara off her head and threw the valuable artifact into the dirt before proceeding to rub the sides of her skull. Her head was pounding with the worst headache she'd ever had in her life. The first to recover was Rarity, who forced herself to her hoops and looked around for any sign of Nightmare Moon. Is it over? I reckon it is, Applejack answered. A small smile formed on her face. I didn't think it'd be that easy a second time, or that Trixie would actually be able to sub in for Twilight. Trixie huffed, her large ego unaffected by her splitting headache. You doubted that I could be the new bearer of the element of magic? Don't you know you can always count on the great and powerful Trixie? Applejack rolled her eyes. But the gesture went unnoticed as the residents of Ponyville began to encircle them. The crowd was cheering their heroes in the defeat of Nightmare Moon. Soon the princess would grace the town with their presence. The moon would be lowered and the sun would rise and everything would be normal. And, as sure as the sun would rise, Trixie stood up and began to bask in the adulation, soaking it all in. Yes, yes, celebrate, ponies of Ponyville. For I, the great and powerful Trixie, have saved Equestria all by myself. I am truly the greatest equine who has ever lived. Very quickly, the cheers from the crowd began to die as Ponyville's residents began to remember why they didn't particularly like the great and powerful Trixie. Still, they wouldn't let Trixie's gloating ruin their happiness. Nightmare Moon had been defeated. It was a day to celebrate. Still, the celebration ended before it even began. From amongst the crowd's hooves, several trails of indigo smoke swirled up into the air towards the bearers of the elements of harmony. The smoke warmed into a swirling tornado, which sucked up the 6 mares despite their panicked shouts. The tornado spun the mares round and round, and moved towards the town hall. Then, as quickly as it had picked them up, the tornado dropped the 6 mares at the foot of the town hall steps, leaving them in a crumpled heap. Did any pony get the license plate number of the carriage that hit us? Pinkie Pie asked, as she lifted her head from the pile, her eyes spinning. Pinkie Pie's question drew a hearty laugh from the swirling indigo tornado. It moved a few feet away from them, to the top of Town Hall steps, and there it materialized into Nightmare Moon. Once more the crowd gasped, for not only had Nightmare Moon been defeated, but she now held all 6 of the elements of harmony in her mane. After glaring down at the 6 mares for a time, Nightmare Moon let a smile creep onto her lips as she descended the steps. For a moment she considered enacting her revenge on the mares who had just attacked her. That's what Nexus would have her do. Still, she was feeling merciful, if only because their attempt to defeat her had been so humorously pathetic. Nightmare Moon focused her attention on Trixie, the mare who actually believed herself to be a match for Equestria's new queen. She took a few steps forward, positioning herself so she towered over Trixie. The show pony was only just starting to recover from her ride in the tornado. She sat up, rubbed her head, and when she finally opened her eyes, Trixie found herself staring into Nightmare Moon's face. "Gotcha," Nightmare Moon whispered with a mischievous smile. With a loud yelp, Trixie jumped to her hooves and tried to run away, but Nightmare Moon quickly whipped out with her magic and caught one of Trixie's legs. This caused her to stumble, trip, and crash to the ground with a painful thud. Yet, despite the pain, Trixie turned over onto her back, and with wide, fearful eyes, she looked up at the towering form of Nightmare Moon. "To celebrate your rather disappointing rebellion," Nightmare Moon said, "I believe I'll be taking a trophy to remember this day." And at that Nightmare Moon let her mane violently strike out at Trixie, who flinched and braced herself for the pain of death. Yet Nightmare Moon didn't touch a hair on her head. Instead, she used her magical mane to remove Trixie's hat and cape. "What? Were you afraid that I would take your pretty little head?" Nightmare Moon sardonically asked. "Don't worry. If I want that, I'll come back for it. Now, if I remember Twilight's story correctly, this is the part where you realize what a fool you've made of yourself, and run away. Mark my words, you haven't seen the last of me," Trixie vowed weakly, trying to save face even though she knew Nightmare Moon was letting her go. "For while you may have won the battle, the war is far from over. The great and powerful Trixie never runs away. She only makes tactical retreats." At that, Trixie used her magic to summon a kind of smoke screen before she ran away as fast as her hooves would carry her. It was the same kind of retreat she had made after the Ursa Minor incident.
and the display left most of Ponyville's residents groaning. While the crowd was disappointed with Trixie, Nightmare Moon reveled in her most recent success. The one thing left that could possibly defeat her, the elements of harmony, were now in her possession. She could now make sure they were never used again. So thrilled was she at her absolute victory, Nightmare Moon couldn't keep herself from having a little more fun. Looking over the crowd of ponies that hung at her every word out of fear, Nightmare Moon once again turned into an indigo cloud. Her body swirled and condensed quickly before she rematerialized, but not as a regal alicorn. No, instead Nightmare Moon had taken on Trixie's appearance, and was wearing the cape and hat she had plucked from the real Trixie but a few moments ago. "Behold, Ponyville!" the shape-shifted Nightmare Moon shouted out in Trixie's own voice. "I am the weak and cowardly Trixie. Thrill as I attempt to pretend that sparklers and flashes of light are worthy of admiration. Bedazzled as I bore you with speeches about my unfounded belief in my own abilities. Gasp as I turn tail and run at the first sign of danger." The not Trixie began to laugh haughtily, finding amusement at her own joke. Still, the performance was met with utter silence. No pony in the crowd gave so much as a chortle or giggle. The silence made the not Trixie's face contort, first into one of pain, then one of annoyance. "Humph, plebeians. You think they would appreciate a man that can shape-shift at will," Nightmare Moon grumbled to herself. She changed back to her normal appearance, with the elements of harmony now joined by Trixie's hat and cape and the embrace of her magical mane. With her impromptu attempt at celebrity roasting, failing to earn a single laugh, Nightmare Moon redirected her focus on the 5 remaining mares that dared to oppose her. She expected them to be shocked, filled with fear, to be trembling in her shadow, but they were, in fact, arguing among themselves. "I told you we shouldn't have used her," Rainbow Dash barked at Applejack. "Oh, hush up, you," Applejack snapped back. "She was the only unicorn we could find who had a special talent for magic, and even that was a long shot." "So, my little ponies," Nightmare Moon began, ending the disagreement and forcing the 5 mares to take notice of her, "what am I going to do with you?" "Do whatever you want. You can't make us talk," Dash shouted defiantly. "Yeah!" Pinkie Pie agreed, only to look quizzically at Rainbow Dash a moment later. "Wait, what would we talk about? Pinkie Pie, shh!" Nightmare Moon chuckled. "Your bickering alone is very amusing to me. How would you 5 like to be my personal court jesters? I'll even let you have visitation rights with Twilight Sparkle." "Your Majesty, the law dictates there is only one punishment for those who dare to attack you." Nightmare Moon turned her attention to the voice, seeing it was one of her bodyguards. She was surprised they actually lingered nearby after her fake defeat. She would have expected them to bolt for the castle to inform Spell Nexus of what had happened. Still, they remained and were now bowing down to her respectfully. Heaving a heavy sigh, Nightmare Moon turned her attention away from the guards that were interrupting her fun. "Let me guess. This is one of Nexus's laws." "Yes, your highness," one of the guards confirmed. "And what does this law say?" "That any pony who attacks your royal grace is to meet the gallows," the other guard answered. "Did he just say gallows?" Rarity asked in a hushed, disbelieving whisper. Applejack nodded. He did, Sugar Cube." "But what about the animals in my cottage?" Fluttershy asked as she started to tear up in panic. "There are some that need their medicine. I have to take care of them. There's a little ferret that needs his bandages changed, and there are songbirds that are just about ready to take their first flight. What'll happen if I'm not there to catch them if they fall?" "You be strong, Sugar Cube. I promise those little animals will get along just fine," Applejack tried to reassure her. Just like how Big Macintosh, Apple Bloom, and Granny Smith will get along. It'll be hard, especially
when the next apple bucking season comes. I don't think Big Macintosh will be able to handle all them trees himself, but Apple Bloom's a gettin' big. She'll be bucking apples any year now. She'll be able to help. But I can't go to the gallows, Rarity wailed in a panic. I just can't. What about Sweetie Belle? And who will throw all the parties when I'm gone? Pinkie Pie asked, her usually curly hair starting to deflate and fall straight. Who's going to make the cake when I'm gone? The Cakes are going to have their anniversary party soon, and there's a wedding party we have to cater, and there's a birthday party for Lyra, and what's wrong with all of you? Rainbow Dash bellowed at her friends. She got to her hooves and flared her wings. We can't give up. We can take her without the elements. At that, Rainbow Dash turned and leapt at Nightmare Moon. Yet, before Rainbow Dash could even put a hoof on Nightmare Moon, the two bodyguards had rushed forward and tackled her. They pinned Rainbow Dash against the ground, and while she struggled to try and free herself, the stallions were too strong. She had no hope to escape, and finally the reality of the situation was starting to settle in. We've lost. Applejack sniffed and rubbed her hooves across her nose. She was doing her best not to cry, to be the strong ones for her friends, but she was losing that fight. I'm sorry, Rainbow, but that's what it looks like. But this isn't fair, Dash complained. She began to struggle against the guards as tears formed in her eyes. I was going to the Wonderbolt tryouts this summer. I was going to be a Wonderbolt, and I promised Scoodle I'd teach her how to fly like I do when her wings were stronger. And I promised her that I would, and who's going to clear the weather when I'm not around? Rainbow Dash's questions were the final straw, and Applejack, who had been struggling to be strong, broke like a thin twig. She began to cry with her friends, and Nightmare Moon watched as all 5 mares crumbled under the cost of their attempted rebellion would incur. And as she watched them, Nightmare Moon knew she should have been happy. She should have been enjoying the sight of them suffering, but instead her chest felt tight. My queen, shall we put them under arrest? One of the guards asked. Nightmare Moon opened her mouth to reply, but she could not bring herself to say yes. The words were too heavy on her tongue. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't force herself to do it. She could not doom them, Twilight's friends, to a death at the gallows. Thus, Nightmare Moon said the only thing she could. No, you are to let them go. What? The shouted question had come not just from the guards, but from every pony who heard Nightmare Moon's order. I said you are to let them go. I am officially pardoning them as my first act of the Queen of Equestria. But, my queen, the law says... One of the guards tried to protest. Am I or am I not your queen? Nightmare Moon snapped. Now return to the castle and inform Nexus that I want him to take me through all of the new laws he's enacted. Every single one of them. Also, let him know if he dares enact any more laws without my permission or consent, I will consider it an act of treason. But, my queen, we aren't supposed to leave your side for any. Now! Nightmare Moon bellowed, her angry shout punctuated by a lightning bolt directed at the hooves of the guards. The guards didn't waste a moment after that. They took off and flew towards the now above-ground castle as fast as their wings could carry them. Nightmare Moon kept her eyes on the guards for a few moments before turning her gaze down on the 5 mares, who were now staring back at her. They, along with the rest of the crowd, didn't dare say a word, not until Rarity broke the silence. You're letting us go? Just like that? It is a repayment of kindness and nothing more, Nightmare Moon answered coldly as she spread her wings. For the kindness you showed me when I was but a cowardly filly, I am now sparing your lives. Do not expect the same mercy should you try and rebel against me again. With those final words, Nightmare Moon took flight. She circled over Ponyville, looking down at the crowd and seeing their fear-filled eyes.
She then turned in the direction of her freshly risen castle, and flew to it with the elements of harmony, along with Trixie's hat and cape, floating in her magical mane. With a flutter of wings, Nightmare Moon landed on her bedroom balcony and stepped inside. She floated the elements of harmony to a nearby dresser, and tucked them away with her armor. She removed her helmet last, and hung it from a stud on the wall. Then she simply tossed Trixie's hat and cape onto a table, with the intention of dealing with them later. The now armorless Nightmare Moon lay down on her bed, breathing out slowly as she sank into the softness of her blanket. She wanted nothing more than to simply sleep, yet as she tried to rest, she found sleep would not come easily. Her mind began to turn, to go over her actions of the past few hours, and was struggling to understand some of her more recent choices. First, she didn't attack the guards. She could have easily sent the Children of Nightmare at the castle and seized it by force. In fact, that was what the royal guard expected her to do, to be a direct threat to them. Instead, she had gone a more subversive route. She had impersonated soldiers, infiltrated the castle, all that so she could get to Celestia without hurting any pony else. Second, she didn't kill Celestia or Luna. In her anger, she had come close to finishing Celestia. All it would have taken was a flick of her sword, but then the princess said those words. Celestia made her think of Twilight, and how she would react to the news that her mentor had been slain. Then, even during the fight with Luna, Celestia's words rang out in her mind. In the end, she banished Luna to the moon just as she had banished Celestia to the sun. Thirdly, she had spared Twilight's friends. In fact, she had let them go completely unpunished. Yeah, she had the elements of harmony. But would those mares ever truly accept her rule? Would they not attempt to free Twilight and retake the elements of harmony? It would have made more sense to take them out. Permanently. Yet, like Luna and Celestia, she had spared them, just as she had spared Twilight. She should have struck down Twilight Sparkle the moment Nexus brought her to the throne room. In fact, she should have done it the night she was fully resurrected, when she found Twilight in the crowd. Yet, whenever her thoughts turned to such dark actions, to taking the lives of those ponies, she couldn't bring herself to do it. Nightmare Moon violently shook her head. What was wrong with her? She was no longer that scared crybaby Nyx. She was Nightmare Moon, Queen of Equestria and bringer of the night eternal. She was the sole alicorn left in the world, the most powerful pony that ever lived and ever would live. She had won, and in all aspects her victory was absolute. She had everything she ever wanted. Celestia and Luna were gone. She now held the elements of harmony, the one force that could defeat her. She was the one true Queen of Equestria, and she would reign for millennia to come. Even if she was unwilling to kill, she didn't need to. No pony in Equestria or the world would be able to defy her. She had won, and that was all that mattered.